Welcome back, everyone, to the Anxiety and Free podcast. This is episode 2. I am so excited about this episode. We are talking about From Struggle to Strength, a journey of overcoming OCD. And if you don't know yet, I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder at age 19. And our guest today was also diagnosed with OCD at some point in his life. And I'm excited for him to share because he saw me posting online about my journey with OCD after I finally got up enough courage to fight the stigma, even as a psychotherapist. And he reached out and said, I want to share my story. And I knew we had to have him on this podcast. So, just to give you a little bit about how we know each other, his name is Chester Smithart, and we met on a reality TV show that is centered around entrepreneurs with startups or businesses that had already been running and doing their thing and just wanted to get better at it. And so I met him and his wife there. They had such good energy. I love talking to them in between sets. And today you get blessed to hear a little bit about his journey and whatever he's open to sharing. So, Chester, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's so good to be here, and thanks for being open to listen to my story. Yes, just like Marquita introduced me, my name's Chester Smithart, and we met on the blocks. I was a cast member. Me and my wife own a business, and I've been living with OCD, and I found out there that Marquita was also struggling with it, and I had to just open up and let her know that, hey, I got it too.
Yes.
I'm part of your club there.
We're part of the same club, and it feels so good to know someone else who is part of this club now. And I wish I would have come out sooner with this so that I wasn't so alone all these years. But you know what? Everything happens in its own timing. Everything happens for a reason. So we're going to dive into the interview. And I'm going to, just for anyone listening, I'm looking at my notes. All right. Now, part of me managing my own OCD is not obsessing over being perfect while getting to know the podcast world and learning how to run a podcast. And so I'm not perfect. And that's one thing that tackles OCD is just saying the thing out loud. So I have my notes and my questions that I want to ask Chester on my phone. So bear with me. All right. So the first question is, Chester, you had told me that you had struggled with anxiety since you were a child. And so I was wondering for the audience if you could just describe what that experience was like growing up and how it has changed as you've entered adulthood.
Yeah. So growing up, I have notes for myself too because
Perfect.
when I get into conversations like this, it's very hard for me to keep my own thoughts. They go by really quickly, and with my obsessive compulsive disorder, everything goes by really quick. So I got some notes just quite so I can stay on track with you and everything.
Yeah, you're fine
But
here.
growing up, I didn't even have the words to describe what I was feeling. I just knew my brain wouldn't let me rest. I had these mental loops, these rituals, and obsessive thoughts that I thought were just a part of who I was. As a kid, it felt like I had to earn the right to feel safe or, and sorry, I don't mind. I might get emotional with you a little bit
Yeah,
because I haven't
please
really
get
opened up about it.
emotional. Yeah. This is for anyone listening. This is Chester's first time opening up about this publicly. So emotions are welcome here. Just as like when I'm doing my work as a therapist, this isn't therapy, everyone listening. When I am doing my work as a therapist and in my personal life and on this podcast, like anyone who comes on, please feel free to share your true self and your emotions are always safe with me. I will hold space for you. So you're good, Chester.
All right, thanks. But yeah, so I just went through a lot of mental loops. I was going through a lot of rituals and obsessive thoughts that I thought were just a part of who I was. And as a kid, it felt like I had to earn the right to feel safe or to get the attention from others that I wanted, like my parents, my father, or my mother. And it was just a accumulation of things. As a child, I really think that my OCD was induced by trauma, and I think it was just I had lost my baby sister at a time. My parents were fighting. There was a lot of arguments going on in the house. I was little, and at the time, I thought a lot of it was because of me. And I think when I hit the first grade and my internal monologue started kicking in. And I started hearing myself, and then my thoughts would be racing and be racing about the weirdest things. After my sister passed away, that's when a lot of it started to happen. I remember coming back to school and sitting down in my classroom, and I wasn't feeling too well, and I coughed. And when I coughed, another little girl coughed beside me, and I looked at her, and my internal monologue told me that I made that happen. When that happened, something triggered off in my brain. I was okay. I was like, no, she's okay. But about 15 minutes later, she got up and she threw up in the trash can. And then my internal monologue told me, you did that. That was because of you. Okay. And that just snowball effect. That was the beginning of that internal monologue. I went home that day, went about my regular day, but I now had this new ability, this internal monologue that I discovered, but I didn't talk about that with nobody, you know? So I didn't say, hey, mom, dad, guess what like happened to me today? I heard myself talk in my head. And I think I took that internal monologue and I used it as a defense strategy for when I was at home or when my teachers were telling me I wasn't good enough or something like that. So there was this, it started with the internal monologue, and then the internal monologue was telling me to do certain things as I was doing my schoolwork, such as reading a book. I'd start to read the book, turn the page, and then I had to turn it back and read everything over again, or I just couldn't turn the page. I had to keep turning it back because I just didn't feel right. It felt like an odd number to me. And even numbers have always been something that has been really like comforting to me. Odd numbers, cracks, stepping on cracks, and, or squares. Like as a child, these were things that were really bothering me. And it all started with losing my sister, the trauma I was going through at home, having these learning difficulties, and the teacher not I couldn't tell the teacher. I didn't think I had any issues with me. I didn't start thinking I had issues with myself until maybe a little bit later on from first grade. Maybe about second or third grade, the kids were starting to laugh at me because they would touch me, and when they touched me, I wouldn't get a dirty sensation, but I got more of a sensation of they took a piece of me. And I know it
Mm.
sounds really weird, but it felt like they took a piece of my talent. They took a piece of me. I lost a piece of myself. And that's the sensation I got in my body. And so, my internal monologue, like, you got to wash that off. And I couldn't get up from the classroom to go wash that off. And hand sanitizer wasn't even invented yet. So
Mhm.
I would spit on my hand and wash it off because just wiping it off wasn't good enough. And scrubbing just wouldn't do it either for me. So I developed that internal monologue, and that stuck with me. And the obsessions were always built off of what the internal monologue was pushing me to do to make whatever sensation. It's just always been, the best way I could describe it is a very uncomfortable sensation that I would just get. Rather, it's like a nails on a chalkboard kind of sensation. You're kind of just like, oh my gosh, I just want this to go away. And listening to that internal monologue, rather it was to touch a line or someone bumped into me, and I hated going into crowds. Because as a younger person, when I would be more subjected to being completely in paralysis from my OCD, because I would just not know what to do. I would just stay in one spot and do the same thing over and over again. If I went into a crowd such as the mall or something, it'd be very painful to me, because if someone bumped into me, I would have to find that person in the mall and like nudge them
Mm.
again, and then I would have to do it
Yeah.
again. And I didn't have a certain number to go by. Now, of course, I liked even numbers. And if I didn't land on an even number, that was an issue for me. But I just had to continue until this feeling went away. And if I couldn't get that feeling to go away, oh my goodness, it was just so frustrating for the whole day. They always would say I had anger issues and stuff, and it wasn't that. It was just I'd really be struggling with this, and I didn't know how to tell anybody. Kids would notice it in school, and they would really like try to aggravate it.
Mm.
Just kids being kids.
Yep.
And like it was just painful. OCD, some of the sensations that we can get can be painful. unfortunately, the sensations I would get would be mentally painful and then physically painful, and then I would be tired. And I did gymnastics for a long time as a child, and I don't mean to go off or anything like that because I
You're
know I can,
fine.
but
You're
I did
fine.
gymnastics for a long time, and my OCD really made it a struggle for me to progress in that. And but it did help me learn how to start realizing and managing my OCD. So as a child, experiencing OCD was very traumatic just through my family. They didn't understand it, so they were trying to discipline it out of me. My friends didn't understand it, so they would just continue on thinking that it was just something that I had to like push through. Into adulthood, I struggled with it all the way into high school, and that's when my gymnastics coach came over to me while I was practicing vault, and he goes, "Hey, I have a question for you. Do you ever wash your hands a lot?" And I said, "No, no, I don't. I don't do that.
Yeah.
I don't have an issue with that." But my issue at that time was when I would get nervous, especially before I was doing a performance for a gymnastics competition, before I saluted the judge, I would continuously spin. And I mean, like, I'm going to stand up. I would just
Physically.
continuously stand up and spin.
Wow.
And then that turned into a spin with an added heel clip to my like buttocks. I had to clip both of my heels up to, and then a hop. So
Yeah.
it was something. I was something to view when out there on the gymnastics
I bet.
circuit. It was like, wow, look at that guy. What's he doing? And then
Mhm.
I would salute the judge and do my performance. But I struggled learning skills because I would always be in my head during my
Yeah.
performances or just having to go backwards. I would always be in my head and have this internal monologue talking to me. I always like describing it as I was growing up to people that I had a little devil and I had the little angel here, and the little angel was my own like internal monologue, my thought, and then the OCD was my internal monologue, but exactly what I don't want to hear, and that included visual, like if I didn't believe the internal monologue, he'd be like, "Here, let me show you,"
Mhm.
and I say he because it was me.
'Cause
It was my internal monologue, and he would show me just the randomest things, or the OCD would show me the randomest things, or give me the most weirdest feelings in my body.
yeah.
And that's the best way I can explain my childhood OCD. And then going into adulthood, I took up some, I guess you could call it guided meditation. It was a sports psychologist, and he helped me through my difficulties getting through my routines for gymnastics. And after seeing him and having some sessions with him, I had this light bulb moment that I could control my obsessions and my compulsions. I didn't have to do the spin. I didn't have to spit on my hand. I could change it to do something else that would benefit me. So as I was younger, I turned to exercise. Instead of doing the spin, I would do squats or push-ups real quick. And
Mhm.
people would ask me, "What are you doing?" "I'm just exercising,
Just exercising.
and they would be like, "Okay, he's just a really, big fitness guy or whatever. That's cool." And it
Yeah.
normalized me a little bit more, It made me in great shape as well. But then I added that to my gymnastics practices and such. So I was still struggling with my obsessive compulsive disorder. And don't let me even get you started about, or get me started about getting dressed. Because as a child, it
Yeah.
took me hours to get dressed. And I would get disciplined because I couldn't put my socks on fast enough. I couldn't tie my
Mhm.
shoes fast enough,
Yep.
or I had to put I would put my shirt on and off, on and off, on and off. Light switches on and off. I would have to close the door, and it was just not because I needed a number, not because something was telling me to do that. It just I had this overwhelmingly bad feeling go through my body, and mentally it would hurt, like almost like just you get a bad thought or you see something bad and you're just like, "Oh my gosh," that's what would happen. And learning was so difficult, and there was no teachers that would understand. I would talk with teachers because I was most comfortable with them. They wouldn't look at me the same way my parents did, but they didn't understand either. I got the impression a lot when I would open up to teachers that I was just trying to get away with something or
Yeah.
something like that, and that wasn't it. Just I was trying to figure out what was going on with me because my buddy over here is telling me a whole different story. I'm asking him, "Does he go through this kind of stuff?" And he's like, "No." And I'm like, "Why am I going through? Let me go ask Susie over here." And I asked Susie, and Susie's like, "No, I don't go through any of that." And I mean, I'm getting these facial hits and everything, and then I'm getting hints as a kid. I'm like, I need to be quiet.
Yep.
I need to
Yep.
not talk about this anymore. And so I struggled with that, and I didn't open up until I opened up to a doctor. I didn't open up to my coach. I opened up to a doctor, and that opened up a whole spiral for me. I mean, I went through having to stay in hospitals, to going through ECTs, to several just different kinds of medications. They were throwing everything they could at me, right?
Mm.
And it was destroying my life. Um, I got accepted to go to West Point, and my coach didn't give me my letter or anything because he told me you're not going to make it there anyways. They can't take you. You take medicine. You got your OCD. You know
Mm.
that hit me, and I mean, like, man, that hit me hard because
Yeah.
everybody else was going, and I
Yeah.
wanted to do it. But I had a lot of adults in my life telling me, you can't, you got
Mhm.
this, this is your issue. And I didn't want that to be me. And I took that later on in life into my adulthood. I said, I'm not going to let that be me. And I continued on. I struggled, but I found my way to get through all the struggles. And I learned how to change my obsessions into beneficial things to work on myself. That turned on working on to something like my own business. And
Yeah.
then instead of doing certain things, I obsessed over my business. And so it kind of became my OCD has just always evolved with me as I've grown up.
Mhm.
It's never the same. It always changes. Some things will last for years with me. Some things will just stick with me, and I just have to wake up and try to say, "Hey, no." What's been working for me as an adult is I tell myself I love myself. I say, "Hey, I love you."
I
And that
love
helps me out a
that.
lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, and having my daughters helped me out a lot too. Having her has really helped me out. But yeah, I didn't mean to go off topic there on you a little bit.
You're fine. Yeah. And because oftentimes that ends up answering other questions. And in my mind, in my OCD mind, it frees me to kind of dive into some of the things you were saying, and I never want this to feel like we're on a script during this podcast.
Yeah,
I want it to
I don't want
feel,
to either.
yeah, authentic and like it's flow. And, you have helped me just by sharing your story. And I've had OCD since my elementary years. Just hearing you, there's so much I resonate with. And I'll have to do an entirely separate episode on my own OCD journey. But I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I was a cheerleader all throughout high school. And it was a struggle I was a base. So I had to hold people's feet.
Hmm.
I can't remember all of the terminology for it, but I hated that part. I hated it because my brain would think, where have they been stepping? Have they stepped on gum? Is there dirt on the bottom of their shoe? Is it wet from the grass? What is it? And that was something I had to overcome. And so I forgot about that memory until I heard you talking about gymnastics.
Yeah.
So you mentioned in the beginning that some of these things are strange, and I'm glad you used that word because part of me deciding to open up about my own OCD, I knew that people would label some of these things as strange or weird. And so I just want to just normalize it. Some of these things are very odd. These
Yeah.
behaviors are very odd. These thoughts are odd. And so if anyone's listening and they're thinking that it's okay for you to think this sounds odd,
Yeah.
because as people with obsessive compulsive disorder, we're considered neurodivergent. Our brains just work differently. OCD is actually listed as a disability option. I have never checked it off on job applications
No.
historically. I've never identified it as a mental disability. However, it is considered a disability. We are neurodivergent individuals. So our brains just work differently and we're unique in that way. And some of the things you talked about, I just thought, my goodness, it must have been hard to be a child going through these things. And to, in hindsight, I can understand that you're reflecting and you understand that it was triggered by trauma, and mine was as well as a kid. And you don't know what to do with it. And so I just love hearing that you can identify now that it's this part of you that has this voice. Like OCD, it's in your voice, which is what makes it so odd when you're experiencing it. These instructions are coming in your own voice and they're commands. And the way you describe how it feels, the discomfort if you don't listen to that demand, and what happens if you don't, right? There's so much fear built into it that it becomes this thing you almost become a slave to it. It's
Yeah.
just you have to do these things or else. So, yeah, just hearing your story, I and your tears even. Like I even heard myself in your tears because I just have spent so many years crying, just thinking, how do I turn this off? Why do I
You
keep
can't.
rereading the same paragraph over and over?
Yeah. I think it's really important for us, everybody that's struggling with it, that once I see, and I used to believe I could turn it off because I remembered the time when I didn't struggle with it. I remembered the time when it turned on. So I've
Yes.
always believed I could turn it off. There's some way, but it's so embedded into me that I don't think I think I'm far past turning it off. However, I'm at the point where I redirect it. I
Yeah.
just redirect it. And I want everybody to understand that these feelings that we go through, okay? And it's a fingerprint because everybody's different, okay?
Mhm.
But these feelings that we have are real, okay? Everybody's having these some types of feeling that's
Mhm.
forcing them to do what they're doing, okay? Because it's just so uncomfortable that we don't want it. Okay, you can feel it in your chest, you feel it throughout in your bones, you feel it all throughout your body. But I think what the best thing is that I've learned to do is redirect it to something positive or redirect it into something where the thought will just slowly fade away. You know,
Mhm.
what I really like to do, Marquita, is I play pool. I play
Yeah.
pool now, and it's a struggle for me to play pool and focus. I'm at a high level. I think I'd be at a higher level if I didn't struggle with this, but I'm very proud of myself. And
Yeah.
when I'm in situations where I feel like everything is getting loud in my head, or I feel just overwhelmed and I need to take breaths, I start looking at my entire area. And I envision myself standing in the middle of, I've never been to New York, but in the middle of Times Square. And
Yeah.
just all this traffic's moving around me. I can hear the cars, I hear the people walking and everything. Okay. And if that doesn't help me out, I envision in front of me, and I don't know what it is about my obsessive compulsive disorder. I know a lot of people don't have a very, or they can't relate to having a visual, like being able to visualize stuff in front of them, but I'm very good at, like, if I want to sit in Times Square, I can sit right here and I can see Times Square. I can
Yeah.
visualize everything. So
Yeah.
if that doesn't work for me while I'm sitting there, if I have thoughts that are overwhelming me, or at the blocks, this was happening to me when everybody was going up on stage. Are they going to call me and stuff like this? So I had to really gather myself and get myself together and visualize rain coming down in that auditorium. Me listening to the rain just takes me away from anything else going on mentally, and me having to use that mental power to visualize this stuff really would take me away from that too. So that helped me out. I don't know if anybody's struggling with it, but if you are struggling with some overwhelming thoughts at a time, if you can just kind of grab yourself and try to visualize around you, like you're at a train station and you're listening to a train drive by you and it's raining or something that can just wash out the noise.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned you basically just shared 2 strategies with us, and I love that, and these are things I do as well, so I'm so excited to further point these out for people. 1, you use visualization, and, you describe OCD so well, and maybe it's because I also have it, so I'm just hearing so much of myself. I can visualize myself anywhere. I can put myself on a stage and I can speak to 50,000 people and be calm. I can put myself on a beach right now. Visualization has been powerful in my own OCD journey. And another thing you mentioned was channeling it. Channeled it earlier you mentioned that you channeled it into entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
And then you also mentioned channeling it into playing pool. And so I think it's so important for people with OCD and people in general to have some sort of hobby, have some alternatives for things that you can do to channel these symptoms, because if not, sit with you. And that
Yeah.
sitting, I had never heard someone describe the physical part of OCD because it's in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, right? We're currently on the DSM-5. And but the physical piece is the piece that I feel gets neglected when people are talking about it openly. Yes, we're in our heads. Yes, we can visualize. Yes, our brains are operating differently. They're telling us to do things. You mentioned earlier, Chester, it was exhausting, and I've experienced that exhaustion. So it's so mentally draining that it wears you down physically. And sometimes there's just this tension in the body from that being worn out mentally that shows up, and soreness, it starts to manifest itself physically. So I'm curious to know too, and I'm all off of our questions too, which is
That's
fine,
okay.
right?
It's okay.
How
This is
have
this is
you
this is the way it needs to be.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we can go back to the questions, but this is the way it needs to be. I think for someone that who's struggling and is going to come to this and
Yeah.
need just. I mean, these are two older adults that just have been dealing with this for as long as we can remember,
Mhm.
So I mean, I just want to get it out because I've been sitting like I have this ability now that I've gotten through so much of this that I just need to help if I can help. That's all I want to do,
Yeah.
because I didn't have any resources. I didn't have any resources. I had adults and I had doctors to go to, and they filled my head with a bunch of nonsense. I felt like a bunch of nonsense. They put my body through a bunch of stuff that I wish I didn't go through. The ECTs, for one, I wish I'd never gone through those. I can't remember a lot of stuff from my childhood because of those and stuff like that. But I needed somebody to sit down with me as a child and talk with me and just listen to me, and not because I feel like a lot of times when I would sit down to talk with somebody, they would hear me and they would stop me to tell me what was wrong, and
Yeah.
then they would, okay, let me hear more. Okay, wait, okay, this is
Yep.
okay, this way, and I'm like, man, but I think if someone sat down and listened to me and they could just relate a little bit, maybe try to put themselves in my shoes, even though some of my stuff was a bit wacky, okay,
Mhm.
and just maybe see where I was coming from with it. There was a lot of negativity. I mean, I was a really small child too, so I got negative from my peers at the
Yeah.
gym, friends at school, negativity from my teachers, negativity from my coaches, my family, my father, my mother, and it was from everybody, and they didn't understand. And so I don't hold anything against them. Okay. I wish they would have done things differently, but I don't hold anything against them. Even those bullies that did those horrible things and made me feel absolutely horrible and caused me all this mental pain. Even the teachers that ruined my me going to state for gymnastics in high school.
Yeah.
That story. I was practicing gymnastics in high school because my high school had a gymnastics facility, and at that time I had maybe one or two of these little hairs on my chin, and I mean they were very small. And
Yeah.
nowadays they're not strict about it, but back then they were very strict about just having a little tiny bit of facial hair. And I had already dressed out, and my coach was like, "Hey, you have a little bit of facial hair. I'm gonna need you to go and shave." And I said, "Okay, let me finish this vault, and I'll go and shave." She didn't like that. The football coach was walking by, and she told him that I was being defiant. And he came
Mm.
over and started talking with me, and he told me that he was going to have to take me to the principal's office because I didn't go to shave right away.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I just want to do my vault real quick. I'm already dressed out. And he grabbed my arm. Okay. And this teacher doesn't know me or anything, but I asked him. I said, "Hey, please don't grab me. I don't. It really bothers me. Please don't grab
Mhm.
me." I was already open enough with the school that they knew I was struggling with this and that I
Yeah.
had this issue. And I had been open with it because I had an extreme obsessive compulsive disorder in high school. And I mean, it was probably at its peak in high school. I
Yeah.
don't know why, but in high school, I had it at its peak. There was a lot of stuff going on in high school every
Yeah.
single day when I was in there. And I was maybe 4'11", and I was going through it all like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. But he grabbed me and it turned into a whole other ordeal and everything like that. But like that's just the thing that if you're not opening up about it, it's just going to get misrepresented. No one's going to understand. So you need to be able to surround yourself with. And if I could go back in time and talk to myself as and talk to my parents and sit down and be like, I would say, hey, get me out of gymnastics, get me around some positive individuals, people that are going to bring a lot of positive in my life, that's not going to bring a lot of negative in my life. Just and probably get me out of school, probably homeschool me for a little bit, because I
Mhm.
think that didn't help me out any. It just prolonged my struggle. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. You went through so many things. And what you highlight is that people were aware that you were struggling with something, and the response to it wasn't helpful all the time. And it's already hard enough to have all these things going on in your head that are even manifesting physically in your experience. And then you're really stressed because you're getting bullied. There's something going on at home too. and then no one's stopping to dig deeper, to ask some questions about, okay, like, let's sit down, what's really going on? And this is something my mother and I have talked about too, about my own OCD journey. She often says, like, I didn't know. I didn't know, right? But I hid you, yeah, you hide so much when you have OCD because it all just seems off in your head. You use the word, it was wacky. Like, it all, to me too, it all seems so wacky. So how
Yeah,
could
wacky.
I? How could I open
Yeah.
up and risk ridicule, risk
If it seems
judgment?
wacky to me, it's gonna seem wacky to you, right?
Exactly, like, I'm trying to make sense of why I have to touch this thing a certain amount of times, and I had the even number thing too, still to this day, even numbers are my preference, still to this day.
Yeah.
I have a way of handling that. However, it's just so interesting again to hear myself in your story. And I'm curious to know about these treatments. You mentioned ECT. I'm assuming that's electroconvulsive therapy. Yeah. And then you mentioned medication. How long would you try these things? And then how long did it take to realize this isn't working? Did you feel like you could speak up and say, this isn't working? I don't like the way I feel.
Yeah. So my struggle was when that coach came over to me during that gymnastics session and asked me if I washed my hands. Okay. He opened me up to the idea that I might have OCD.
Mhm.
Okay. And when I was finally opened up to this idea, it wasn't an idea to me, it was an answer. It's like,
Right. Yeah.
this is what it is.
There's a
There's a
name.
name to it. Because
There's
I
a
thought
name.
I had this ghost just thing that are just this thing that I was only experiencing from what I had talked with my peers, and they had told
Yeah.
me it was only me. I had to be
Mhm.
quiet about it. I was like, yes, I can finally talk about it, right?
Yes.
But that spiraled into something. I don't regret talking about it. I don't regret finding out that I had it. Okay. And that was very relieving to me. And at that moment, I cried. I felt good. It was like a huge weight off my shoulders. I felt something come out of my chest.
Yeah.
Like I can remember just talking about, I can remember the feeling I had finding out, oh my gosh, there's a name to this. Okay.
Mhm.
So, but that just spiraled into going to see one doctor, to that doctor saying, oh, I can't help you. Go see another doctor. To this doctor saying, oh, I can't help you either. Go see another doctor. Let's try this medication. This medication is not working. To my parents saying, hey, this medication is changing you. So we're going to go ahead and dump it out and just stop giving you the medication and give you
Yeah.
placebos and see if it makes you think you're just thinking this. Okay.
Yes.
And that had a huge effect on me. So my parents were against medication. I wasn't against it, but it wasn't helping me, not in school. I was a
Yeah.
zombie at school, and they were just using me as just a little science experiment. Let's find out if this works. Let's find out if this works. If this isn't, well, let's combine it with this. I'm taking an Ambien to go to sleep and these other anxiety medications and and just switching it up, constantly getting sick and not being able to go to school and not being able to perform gymnastics. I tore my whole shoulder apart because the medication. When I was doing a skill, I fell through the bars. I landed, and my bone came out. Like so, it was just it's been, and then after taking the medication, now I'm labeled. I'm labeled now. Okay. Before they were looking at me to go to the Army Academy. Now I'm labeled. You labeled this on me as I'm becoming an adult right before I'm turning 18. Like, I wish you labeled this on me when I was 5, not when I'm
Yeah.
turning 18, you know?
Yeah.
And so, oh, well, you want to get better, right? Yeah, I want to get better. Well, we need to send you to the hospital. You got to go stay there for a little bit and stuff.
Yeah.
And, months, I stayed in the hospital maybe for 8 to 9 months, almost a whole year, just trying to
Oh my
get better,
goodness.
having to
Yeah.
do school there. Um, yeah, so it was just my whole experience with it was very dramatic and traumatic, and I didn't want that. I just wanted a relieving experience. So I regretted, even acknowledging I had it. Yeah, I'm sorry. I went off kind of a little bit there.
No need to apologize, really. I'm picking up things in your story, and as always, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm thinking that marked a second loss, a second huge loss, because in the beginning you talked about your sister passing away. And I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your sister too. And then you talked about potentially going to the academy and how that was ripped from you and having this
Yeah.
other huge loss. And all of these things create so much stress. And in the midst of all of that, in between, you were already dealing with bullying, people talking about your height and people picking on you for certain things, being experimented on, because it definitely, being on psychotropics, it can feel like an experiment. It just does, because everybody's body responds differently to different medications. And so it sounds like people were trying to help you, and then there were all these stressors, and then geez, you get hit with another huge loss. And then you're thinking, Jesus, nice to know what it is. And I had that moment too, like, it has a name. There's a name
Yeah.
for it. Like when you said that, that's exactly what I said to my psychologist when I got diagnosed with it. There's a name for this. So you have this moment of excitement because you finally understand you're not alone. There are other people who clearly have this diagnosis. You don't know any of them at the time, right? But then what does it end up taking from you? And
Yeah.
so I was just hearing that, like, your sister's loss, that took something from you. And then you have all these behaviors that start to spiral. Then that loss at 18, my goodness, that's
Well,
heavy.
I started fighting it after I lost my sister. I realized, hey, my friends aren't dealing with this. I need to kind of get my head straight again. So I started fighting it. But the following year, my mother became pregnant with my baby brother, and she also miscarried my baby brother. And throughout that pregnancy, my mother would reassure me every day I needed to pray, and I needed to pray, and I needed to do good, and God would bless us with my baby brother. Now my internal monologue got some new stuff to feed on. It's like, oh, this is great. Okay. God is not happy with you, Chester, if you don't do this. If you don't do this, God's not going to be happy with you, Chester, and your baby brother's not going to make it because your baby sister didn't make it. You need to do that. Go step on that. Go touch that wall. Go do that again. Don't
Yeah.
read that book. You turn it back. This is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay. This is what that internal monologue sounds like. And so, like, when I was explaining this to doctors, they're like scratching their heads saying schizophrenia, this and that, all these
Mhm.
different kinds of things. And one doctor says this, one doctor says that. And I finally found a doctor I was pretty comfortable with, and I went and saw him, and I stopped seeing him, and I let him know that I was going to venture off and go do my own thing. And I was young. I was like, I'm probably gonna go self experiment. I'm gonna go probably try to find my own way. After everything, it gets tiring, and you feel drained, you feel beat up, and you get tired of feeling like you're in this straitjacket, and
Yeah.
that's not where you want to be as a person. I got to a point before I had my daughter that I don't want people to look at me like this. I don't want my grandparents to die thinking that I never overcame this, or I made anything of myself. I
Yeah.
had a teacher in eighth grade tell me I was going to grow up under the bridge.
It was
And
wrong.
that hit me hard at home too. And just there was just always so much negativity. I was my own light. And if you're struggling with OCD, you got to be your own light. You got to
Yeah.
learn to be your own light and quit trying to get light from anyone else. I think I struggled too long trying to get someone to help me when I could have helped myself,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I love that message. Be your own light. And that's especially what it takes when someone is living with OCD and no one else understands it if you've opened up about it. Or maybe people say they understand it, but they're still being dismissive about your experience. And you're the one having this internal experience, So we do have to learn how to be our own light. And Chester, I love that you brought up this spiritual aspect. Your mom saying, you got to do what's right, you got to do right by God. Because again, I'm seeing so much of myself in your story. And I grew up, my dad was an associate pastor of a church growing up. And so my OCD brain latched onto a lot of beliefs. And I'm still a Christian to this day. And my relationship with God was strained throughout my childhood, throughout my young adulthood. I'm just now starting to really dive back into the Bible this year because I spent so many years having to be detached from it after having a childhood where I'm having to go to Sunday school every Sunday because my dad's one of the pastors, and my brain's latching on to these messages and doing something with them and twisting them and turning them into rituals. And so I, for years, just said, yes, I'm still a Christian and I believe in God, and I got to stay away from the Bible, though. I got to stay away from some of this messaging because it's attacking me. Like my OCD is taking it and absorbing it. And so I was wondering if you're open, if you could share a little bit about your spiritual journey, even if you no longer identify as Christian. I'm curious to know What did that do to your spiritual journey and your relationship with God over time?
So I had similar issues going into all the way into high school that, I'd be punished. I don't want to go, and a lot of my issues too would spring from family. It wouldn't be necessarily me going to be going in the hellfire or anything like that. It would
Yeah.
be, if you don't do this, this is going to happen to your grandmother. This is going to happen to your cousin. Okay. And it would even happen. And like I said, if I didn't listen to it, it would be like, well, let me show you, and
Yep.
it would give me a visual, and I would get visuals of, at that time we were in Afghanistan, there was troops in Afghanistan fighting, and I would get visuals of fighters fighting and losing their lives, and it would tell me it was because of me.
Yep.
Okay. I'd be in the nurse's office just screaming and struggling because I can't get it to stop. I just don't want to see this stuff. I don't want to see these individuals getting hurt. And I can't turn it off in my head. It's not like I have the remote control and can just turn it off. So, that was a big struggle. And the internal monologue would just completely feed off of it. Be like, oh, I got control of you now. So like, as
Yeah.
long as I have you connected with God and I have this connection. That's why when I said my mother brought it up, my internal monologue was just like, yes, and
Yep.
that's exactly how it was. And it was just like, yes, that's great. Yeah, you got to listen. And I just didn't want bad things to happen to anybody. To this day, I still identify myself as Catholic. However, I look at religion this way. Before there was written scripture, okay? Before anybody had anything written down in sand or stone, okay, where did we get our sense of God? Okay, where did we get this sense? Where did the question come from? It
Mhm.
came from here. It came from here in our heart. Okay, so our sense of God was always here.
Mhm.
And before it was written down on paper or stone or sand, it was always here in our heart. We always have known good and bad, wrong from right. Okay, so God is in my heart. And I feel like that is what's going to keep me from going to any type of eternal damnation. When it was written in stone, I don't remember. Okay, I read about the devil, I read about evil. Okay, yeah, I was told about the devil, I was told about evil. Okay, but in my heart, through every day, I don't wake up and feel evil. Okay, I wake up and I know what's good and I know what's wrong, and I know what's good and I know what's bad. And that's what started before there was any type of written scripture or anything written in stone or anything written in sand. It all came from the heart. So I believe if I just follow my heart through this journey that I'm going through on this world, okay, then I will complete it. And all I can ask for myself is to complete my journey in the most humblest way, and where I'm not trying to be an angel on earth or anything like that, but I just made it through my journey and I didn't try to bring any harm to anybody. I
Yeah.
just try to bring good to myself and the ones that I loved and the ones that surround me in my life. And I think anybody, that's what we can do. We don't have to
Mhm.
go about the book. I don't think we should. I think those are rules put in place to be guidelines to control people and get them to conform to different things. I think, the answer to everybody's thing has always been inside of them. And as long as we wake up every day and we are out to do the right thing, okay? I mean, we got to just think about it. What's the right thing? And the first thing that comes to mind, that's most likely going to, or first thing that comes to heart is going to be the right thing.
Mhm.
Might not be the first thing that comes to mind, but the first thing that comes
Yeah.
to heart, that's
Yeah.
going to be the right thing. Because these are two different things we think with, okay? Our mind and our heart. It's just, that's the truth. You can
Yeah.
feel things here in your heart, just like you can feel things here in your head.
Mhm.
Okay. So that's where I am spiritually with it. My daughter, I teach her about Jesus. I've learned about
Yeah.
Jesus. I believe in Jesus. Okay.
Mhm.
And if you look at any pictures of Jesus, a lot of times you see that light coming out from his heart.
Mhm.
And that's where it's at. That's where your love comes from. You can feel the hate in your heart when you're sad. When you
Yep.
lose somebody, you feel it in your heart. When you have a breakup, you feel it in your heart. When you have that first child, you feel this light up in your heart. The heart has so much. So when you hear the phrase follow your heart, it's true. You need to follow your heart. And with religion, that's kind of where I'm at. Just I'm following my heart.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and I love that you're sharing your faith with your daughter too in the parenting journey. And so you're Catholic, I'm Seventh-day Adventist, and so we have different perspectives on
Mhm.
how we see the world. And still, to me, one thing I heard that overlaps is the obedience part of Christianity as a whole. And so that was something that really, like, I abided by the rules as a Christian as a kid because there were all these rules. And my OCD was like, well, if you don't follow those rules, kind of similar to
Yeah.
some of what your messaging was. If you don't follow these rules, here's what's going to happen. And
Mhm.
here in come the intrusive thoughts. So still identifying as a Christian, as a Seventh-day Adventist, I have had to navigate, like, how much of this strictness can I abide by if it's going to keep me in this space with my OCD. And so yeah, it's been an interesting journey. And so someone's going to listen to this and they're also going to be Catholic and they're also going to be struggling with OCD and they're going to find some inspiration in your spiritual journey. And so I appreciate you sharing that. So, yeah, and then one of our questions actually was about your daughter, just how you found a new focus since overcoming OCD and becoming a parent, and how has it changed your perspective on managing OCD overall?
Yeah. So becoming a parent, I don't want my daughter. Of course, my daughter sees my OCD. It's visible. I can't hide it. Of course, I can control it better, but it's still there every day. I struggle with it. I don't struggle with it where it hurts me. Sometimes it hurts me still, but I struggle with it where it's just a bit frustrating. I live not on edge, but just constantly just frustrated because just everything goes on. I'm not frustrated towards my daughter or anything like that, just like with me, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
it
I'm
does. Makes a
constantly
lot of sense.
frustrated with myself. Especially if I get into a crowded room and things are like loud and stuff like that. It's just it can be a little overwhelming. I gotta get away from it. But I never want her to see me and be like, Dad, you're silly. I don't want that. I don't want her to see the OCD when we get older and her ask me, why do you do that?
Yeah.
I want to have it controlled enough to where never even knew you had OCD, Dad. Wow. Did you? I
Yeah.
didn't even know that. And I want her to be 27 when she's or something like that, in her 30s. Yeah, no, you don't remember me doing those weird little things. That's the OCD. So I mean, that's the big thing. I don't want her to see me struggle. I don't want her to see me like that. She's so caring. Right now, I'm dealing with UC, and it's been really affecting me, and she's just always there. She's about to turn 4, but I mean she's so just caring. Dad, are you okay? Let me get you need to drink water and all this stuff. And she's
Yeah.
growing up so fast that I'm like, man, I really got to get a hold of my stuff because she's
Yeah.
going to be 10 years old next thing I know. And she's going to be pointing out, hey Dad, you're doing something really wacky over there. Why are you doing that? And I,
Yeah.
I don't want her to view me or her friends to view me. I don't want to be that dad,
Yeah.
if that makes sense, you know what I mean?
It does. Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. Yeah. Because I think there's this, when you're as a parent, you're thinking, how much of my authentic self do I let into this? And how much of my authentic self do I protect you from? Especially
Hmm.
when there's OCD in the background. And so, if we've talked about stress this whole time, like how your stressors have really exacerbated your symptoms. That has been the case for me. It's why I work really hard to just be a happy person, practice a lot of gratitude, be on the straight and narrow path in terms of, like, I can't let anything get to me mentally. And I also know that when stress is high, some of those behaviors could start to seep back in. And I don't want my kids to see them. And we talk a lot about mental health in our home. And so it's like, what's the balance of talking about OCD and talking about anxiety and all these things? And then what's the balance of, I still want you to have a childhood, and yet I want you to know what this is, and I want to pay attention to you enough to know if you have it too, and you start to show the signs. There can be a whole OCD ritual
Yeah, I
around
don't
that.
want her to get it. I'm with you on there. I don't want her to get it. That's the biggest fear I think I have.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want her to see me do it and then try to pick up on it, or I just don't want her to get it.
Yeah.
Because you said you wanted them to have a childhood. I want
Yeah.
my childhood. I thought my entire life I had a childhood until I grew up and I realized my OCD prevented me from having a childhood.
Yeah.
Okay. I want her to have the most fulfilling childhood she possibly can. I try to keep everything happy on the up and up all the time. I don't like screaming. I don't like arguing or anything like that. So I try to make compromises and I try to go with the flow, roll with the punches, follow the wind, whatever you want to call it. And that's what we got to do. I think, but someone that's struggling with OCD and it's this extreme OCD, I think if we catch it better sooner than later, it's easier to start managing. If you
Yeah.
can catch it before it starts really embedding into your being, then you there may be hope. I'm not saying there's not hope for people like myself or you, but I believe, and I probably need to get out of the belief that it's just been embedded to me, that I just wake up every day and it's just there and I just need to manage it. That's my now acceptance. I'm tired of trying to believe that there's a light at the end of the tunnel when the light has always been in front of me. I just need to embrace it and go with it.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's been my struggle this whole time. And when I found the opportunity to talk with you, I found that light right there in front of me. Like,
Oh,
hey, you know, I need to talk about this and be able to let it out. And that'll help me practice what I preach,
yeah.
just like when I'm
Yeah.
coaching someone in pool or in gymnastics, if I'm telling them something, it's something that I've already experienced and done myself. I'm not asking them to do anything that I haven't tried myself.
I like how you talk about going into that light. You just made me think about now when I talk about OCD, it's my superpower because part of my healing journey was getting to choose what parts of OCD I wanted to keep and
Hmm.
choosing what parts I wanted to let go of. I certainly didn't want to read things 10 times over. I didn't want to always have to land on an even number, and I wanted to be able to challenge these things in my mind, and I didn't want it to run the show because for so long OCD was driving the car and I was in not even in the back seat. I was in the trunk. Like, please let me out. And now I feel like OCD is in the trunk. And sometimes it climbs its way into the back seat. Sometimes it breaks through and I'm not driven by it though, even in those moments. It doesn't get to be a backseat driver and say, "Oh, turn down that road right there." Oh no, I'm still in control here. So there's so much hope with OCD, and what I find so impressive about you is that you describe your journey so well and you recognize in hindsight some of the things that would have been helpful, some of the things that weren't, and you just describe it as this journey of evolving. Like the title of this episode is From Struggle to Strength, and I hear so much strength in your voice as you share your story. Is there anything that you would want someone listening who may be struggling with OCD, maybe knows someone with OCD? Is there anything you haven't shared with us that could be helpful for other people that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think I can say one more really good thing that I know, that internal monologue that is giving you so much trouble day in and day out, night after night, hour after hour, second by second. Change it to someone you love. Change it to their voice. My daughter is my new one. So when I'm down on that last shot on the pool table and I'm about to shoot it, I hear her say, "Daddy, you got this. I love you." Instead of hearing all the other negativity, I can listen to that, but I always end with her voice saying, "You got this. I love you." And if you can change your internal monologue to someone that you truly feel that loves you and cares about you, and I have my daughter, she's mine. If I didn't have her, I'd probably use my wife, but my daughter is the best one. And that's what's been really working for me. I hope anything that I've been able to share, I hope can really work for you too.
That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Your daughter's voice, just changing that voice, it's so powerful and it's an unused skill, I think, changing that internal dialogue. Chester, is there somewhere people could link up with you and follow you? You talked about pool. I know you have a pool business. I believe it's Action Pool. Is that the
Yeah,
name
it's
of
the
it?
Action Pool app.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But you can follow me on Facebook. That's fine. You can link up with me there or Instagram if anybody ever just wants to chat or talk, or if y'all are open to having video conversation. I am too.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate your time today. I'm so glad you
Yeah.
reached out and I'm so glad we didn't follow the script today.
Yeah.
I'm so glad. And for anyone listening, there are resources for you. I will put those in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning into From Struggle to Strength, a journey of overcoming OCD with Chester Smithart. I'll see you next time.
Thank you. God bless.
The Anxiety and Free podcast is sponsored by Find My Therapist, connecting you with therapists at findmytherapist.us. If you found today's episode helpful, please share it with someone who might need it. Tune in next week for more conversations on navigating mental health and finding your freedom.